The clatter of expensive china was the metronome of Cassie's life. At 28, her existence had been compressed into the gilded cage of Aurelia, a restaurant so exclusive it didn't have a sign, only a reputation. It was a place where men whose net worth exceeded the GDP of small nations debated the merits of $100 ounce of Wagyu. Cassie was a ghost in this world, a blur of efficient movement and professional deference. She was good at her job because she had perfected the art of being invisible. Her anonymity was her armor. Tonight, the throne, the restaurant's most coveted table, nestled in a private alcove, was occupied by the king himself, Julian Thorne. Cassie knew his face, not from Forbes or the Wall Street Journal, but from the company newsletters she used to read with a knot of dread in her stomach. Thorne Industries was a behemoth of mining and energy, a legacy corporation that moved mountains, both literally and figuratively. He was dining with his younger brother, Marcus, a man who wore his ambition like a suit 2 sizes too tight, and 2 geologists, Dr. Finch and Mr. Peterson, whose sycophantic laughter echoed off the vaulted ceilings. "The Ethereum deal is a go," Marcus announced, his voice a triumphant boom that cut through the restaurant's hushed elegance. "We signed the acquisition papers on Monday. The board is unanimous." "A masterstroke, Marcus," Finch gushed, raising his glass of vintage Bordeaux. "Securing the exclusive mining rights to that lithium deposit in the Nevada basin. It makes Thorne Industries the sole gatekeeper of next-generation battery technology. It's revolutionary. Revolutionary and, more importantly, a definitive move away from the old guard," Marcus added, casting a pointed look at his older brother. Julian, a man whose quiet presence seemed to absorb sound, merely swirled the wine in his glass, his expression unreadable. Conradson Energy was sniffing around, but their survey teams are a decade out of date. They missed it completely. A cold, familiar dread coiled in Cassie's gut at the mention of the Nevada basin. She felt the weight of the silver tray in her hand, the 4 perfectly seared scallops suddenly feeling like anchors. "Breathe. Just breathe. You're Cassie. You're invisible." She approached the table with practiced calm. "Your Atlantic scallops, Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice a soft, neutral murmur. "And the truffle risotto for you, sir." Marcus, flushed with wine and victory, barely glanced at her. He saw a uniform, not a person, a prop in the grand play of his success. A cruel, boyish idea sparked in his eyes as he looked from Cassie to his silent, imposing brother. "You know, Julian," Marcus said, his voice loud enough to be performative, "you're always going on about ground truth and getting your hands dirty. Well, here she is." He gestured dismissively at Cassie, the very definition of ground level, practically subterranean. Julian's grey eyes flickered up, a flicker of annoyance in their depths. "What are you getting at, Marcus?" "I'm saying you should ask her," Marcus declared, a smirk spreading across his face. "Ask the waitress for her opinion on the Ethereum acquisition. I'm sure she has some fascinating insights from the employee locker room." Finch and Peterson exchanged nervous glances, then joined in with forced, hollow laughter, their eyes glued to Julian, the true source of power at the table. Julian Thorne, a man who negotiated with governments and whose decisions could reshape global supply chains, leaned back. He looked tired, worn down by his brother's relentless ambition. He saw the joke for what it was, another of Marcus's petty humiliations designed to mock his old-fashioned ways. He decided to play along, if only to end the tiresome display. He looked at her name tag. Cassie. Cassie froze, her back to him. She just wanted to set down the last plate and vanish into the polished woodwork. "My brother has a point," Julian continued, his deep voice carrying an edge of weary irony. "We're about to stake the future of this company on a single geological survey, a $4 billion bet, but we've neglected to consult a key demographic, the service industry." The table, following Marcus's lead, erupted in a fresh wave of laughter. Cassie turned slowly, her face a carefully constructed mask of polite neutrality. Her heart was a frantic drum against her ribs. She was supposed to apologize, to say, "I'm sorry, sir, I wouldn't know." She was supposed to give them their punchline. But then her eyes fell on the documents, spread carelessly on the seat next to Marcus. They weren't financial reports. They were topographical maps, and underneath them, a laminated sheet of spectral analysis data from the Nevada Basin drill cores. Her breath caught in her throat. She wasn't just looking at a deal, she was looking at a ghost. She balanced the heavy silver tray on her hip, her movements suddenly deliberate, precise. She didn't look at Julian's questioning eyes or Marcus's mocking grin. She looked at the colorful bands on that spectral analysis chart. "So, Cassie," Julian prompted, the cruel joke hanging in the air, "you pour wine. What's your take on a multi-billion-dollar mineral rights acquisition?" Cassie's gaze flickered from the chart to the smug faces around the table. She saw their $1,000 suits and their casual, unthinking cruelty. She saw the world she had clawed her way out of, and the one she had been cast out from. And in that moment, the armor of Cassie cracked. She took a slow, steadying breath. Her voice, when it came, was not the whisper of a servant. It was quiet, clear, and cut through the ambient noise of the restaurant like a diamond drill bit through granite. "That's not lithium," she said. The laughter died so abruptly it was as if a switch had been thrown. Finch choked on a sip of wine. Marcus's smirk vanished, replaced by a slack-jawed confusion. Julian Thorne sat bolt upright. His entire demeanor shifted from weary indulgence to predatory focus. The blood drained from his face. He leaned forward, his voice a low, dangerous growl that was for her alone. "What did you just say?" Cassie finally met his gaze. Her eyes, which had been professionally vacant moments before, now burned with a cold, fierce intelligence that startled him. "I said," she repeated, placing the final scallop dish on the table with a hand that was rock steady, "that's not lithium. You think you're buying the next great energy resource? You're not. You're buying a mountain of poison. The acquisition isn't a masterstroke. It's corporate suicide." "Poison? What is she babbling about?" Marcus scoffed, trying to regain control. Julian ignored him, his eyes locked on Cassie. "Explain." "The spectral signature," Cassie said, her voice gaining strength as the years of suppressed knowledge flooded back. "That specific wavelength absorption pattern for lithium-6 is almost identical to the signature for rhodosilicate, especially when scanned with standard, cost-effective equipment. Your rival, Conradson Energy, didn't miss the deposit. They identified it for what it is and ran the other way." Julian's face was a mask of stone. Rhodosilicate. It was an obscure, worthless mineral, highly toxic and notoriously expensive to remediate. It was a geologist's nightmare. How could you possibly know that name?" Julian whispered, the question hanging between them like a physical thing. "Marcus's strategy," Cassie continued, her voice as calm and methodical as a lab report, "is to let you complete the acquisition. The announcement will send your stock soaring. But once you break ground, once the EPA gets their hands on the first real-world samples, they won't just shut you down. They'll fine you into oblivion. The remediation costs alone will be in the billions. Your stock won't just fall, it will crater. While you're trying to mitigate the environmental and financial disaster, he'll initiate a vote of no confidence with the board. He's not trying to build the company. He's trying to buy the wreckage from you for pennies on the dollar." The silence at the table was absolute, broken only by the distant clink of a fork in another part of the restaurant. Finch and Peterson looked as if they had seen a spectre. Marcus Thorne was ashen, his mouth opening and closing with no sound coming out. Julian Thorne stared at the waitress, the joke now a horrifying prophecy. He slowly reached into his breast pocket, his hand trembling almost imperceptibly. He tossed a black, featureless credit card onto the table. "Marcus, pay the bill. My guests are leaving." He turned his chilling gaze on the two geologists. "Finch. Peterson. You're finished. Get out." "Julian, what's happening?" Finch stammered, his face slick with sweat. "Get out!" Julian roared, the sound echoing through the suddenly silent restaurant. The three men scrambled from the table, a chaotic mess of overturned chairs and panicked apologies. Julian Thorne turned back to Cassie, who hadn't moved an inch. She still stood there, the empty silver tray her only shield. "You," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "My car is waiting. You have 5 seconds to decide if you're getting in it. If you don't, I will buy this restaurant by sunrise just to get your employment records. And I promise you, I will find you. Who in God's name are you?" Cassie reached behind her back and untied the strings of her apron, letting it fall onto the table. "My name is Clara Vance," she said, the name feeling foreign and powerful on her tongue after so long. "And Marcus Thorne didn't just ruin my career. He built this entire scam on my stolen work." The ride in the back of the Maybach was a study in pressurized silence. Clara stared out at the rain-slicked canvas of the city, her reflection a pale ghost overlaid on the neon blur. The cheap polyester of her uniform felt like a cage against her skin. Beside her, Julian Thorne wasn't looking at her. He was on his phone, his thumb a blur of motion, firing off messages that were undoubtedly causing seismic shocks within his company. They swept into the underground garage of the Thorne Industries Tower, a monolithic spear of dark glass and steel that pierced the clouds. The lobby was a cavern of polished granite and hushed, intimidating art. The security team, recognizing their chief, stiffened. Their eyes flickered to Clara's waitress uniform with a mixture of confusion and disdain, but Julian's thunderous expression kept their questions unasked. The private elevator ascended with unnerving speed, a silent rocket to the 90th floor penthouse. "Lights 30%, Julian commanded the empty room. The sprawling space softened into a landscape of shadows and city lights. "Lock down this floor, no one in or out without my personal authorization." A heavy, metallic thump echoed as electromagnetic locks engaged. He rounded on her, his face carved from granite. "Clara Vance," he said, the name a piece of evidence he was examining. "The Vance report, the geological prodigy from Caltech. You were Marcus's lead field geologist 5 years ago. You were the one who supposedly discovered the Mirage Creek lithium deposit." "I was framed," Clara said, her voice flat, stripped of the years of rage and despair. "Everyone's framed," Julian shot back, his cynicism a shield. "Give me one reason, one single, tangible reason, to believe you over my own brother and a dozen accredited survey reports." "I don't care if you believe me," Clara said, walking past him to the immense floor-to-ceiling window. The city was a circuit board of light below. "You asked who I was. I told you. You asked how I knew about the deal. I told you. The question isn't whether you believe me. It's whether you can afford not to." "You're telling me a story," Julian countered, circling her like a shark. "A very compelling one. Rhodosilicate, the spectral signature. How do you know? The reports my team has, the ones from Geocore and Terra Analytics, they're clean. Flawless." They're clean because Marcus designed the fraud around the tests, Clara said, turning to face him. He didn't fake the data. He exploited a loophole in the methodology. Standard spectral analysis, the kind used for 99% of preliminary surveys because it's fast and cheap, has a blind spot. A 1 in a million blind spot where those two minerals present as identical. He's not hiding the poison. He's letting your own cost-saving measures do it for him. He's counting on you to do what every other major firm would do. Trust the preliminary scans to save a few million on the front end. Julian stared, his mind, accustomed to the complexities of hostile takeovers and market manipulation, struggling to grasp the raw, earth science deception. Marcus was my mentor, Clara said, her voice lowering, the past rushing back in. I was his star geologist. I developed the deep scan algorithm that identified the Mirage Creek site in the first place. I trusted him. I looked up to him. She gave a short, bitter laugh. And then I found it. An anomaly in the deep core samples that didn't match the initial scans. I ran the tests myself, in my own time. I bypassed the standard protocols. I used mass spectrometry, and I found the truth. It wasn't lithium, it was worthless, toxic rock. You confronted him. It wasn't a question. I was 23, she said. I was naive. I thought he'd made a mistake. I thought he'd be grateful I caught it before it went public. He smiled that same smile I saw on his face tonight. He told me I was brilliant. He said he'd take care of it. Her voice grew colder. The next day, he fired me. He produced a report, under my name, with fabricated data, proving the deposit was lithium. He used my own reputation against me. When I tried to blow the whistle, he had already preemptively discredited me. He told everyone I was unstable, a disgruntled employee trying to sabotage the company after being fired for incompetence. He blacklisted me. No one would hire a geologist who'd signed off on a fraudulent report. He didn't just take my job, he took my name, my science, my entire future. So you ran. I ran. I changed my name. I went from analyzing the composition of the Earth's crust to memorizing the ingredients of the soup of the day. For 5 years I've been hiding, watching him rise, watching him get closer to the throne, waiting for him to try it again. A long silence stretched between them, filled only by the whisper of the building's ventilation. Julian walked to a sleek, minimalist bar and poured 2 glasses of ice water. He handed one to her. Her hand was steady, but he noticed her knuckles were white. Why now, Clara? Why risk exposing yourself for me? I'm his brother, but we're not allies. Because he's using my work, she said, her voice trembling with a sudden, violent fury. The Mirage Creek site is less than 50 miles from the Nevada Basin deposit. It's the same geological formation. He's not just running the same scam, he's using the same lay. He's so arrogant, he thinks I'm the only one who could see it. And he buried me so deep he never thought I'd surface again. She took a sip of water, composing herself. And because he got sloppy. The spectral analysis chart he left on the table tonight, in the corner, there's a calibration signature, a tiny string of code. It's the signature from the exact model of spectrometer I used in my old field lab, a lab he shut down 5 years ago. He's not just using my playbook, he's using my pen to write it. Julian sat down heavily in a dark leather chair. He looked at this woman, this ghost from his company's past. She was trembling with rage, but her eyes were like diamonds, hard and clear. She was not a victim seeking pity. She was a weapon seeking a target. This information, he said slowly, if you're right, it doesn't just save my company, it utterly destroys my brother. You're not doing this to help me. You're doing this for revenge. He took my life, Clara said. Call it whatever you want. All right, Clara Vance, Julian said, standing up. The weariness was gone, replaced by a cold, decisive energy. You want back in the game? You're in. I have an army of lawyers, but they're useless against rock and mineralogy. I have a geological lab on the 60th floor. State of the art. My entire survey and analysis team is down there, rubber stamping this Ethereum deal. He walked to the elevator, keying in a code. But they're loyal to Marcus. Dr. Finch, the man you saw tonight, he was your replacement. He built his career on your mistake. He has every reason to make sure you fail. Finch is either incompetent or he's actively helping Marcus cover his tracks, Clara said flatly. Julian's eyes narrowed. If you're right, my entire department is compromised. If you're wrong, you're just a waitress with a 5-year-old grudge, and you've just declared war on my brother and my senior staff. I've spent 5 years analyzing the structural integrity of a stack of dinner plates, Clara said, stepping into the elevator. Give me access to your lab. Give me the raw, unprepped core samples from the Nevada basin. Give me 6 hours. I won't just find the poison. I'll show you his fingerprints all over it. Julian hit the button for the 60th floor. The signing is Monday morning, Clara. You don't have 6 hours. You have 36. Welcome back to the war. The 60th floor was a world away from the penthouse's dark luxury. It was a sterile, brightly lit expanse of humming machinery and glass-walled labs, known internally as the core. This was the scientific heart of Thorne Industries, where a dozen geologists and technicians turned rock into data. When Julian Thorne emerged from the elevator at 3 a.m. with a woman in a waitress uniform, the low hum of conversation ceased instantly. Everyone, attention, Julian's voice cut through the room. This is Clara Vance. She is a specialist consultant here at my personal direction. She is to be given unrestricted access to all Ethereum project materials, raw core samples, spectral data, everything. Give her whatever she needs. Dr. Finch stepped forward. He was a man whose academic air was soured by an expression of perpetual condescension. He looked from Julian to Clara, his lip curling in disbelief at her uniform. A specialist, Julian? With all due respect, who is she? What are her credentials? She's the person who's going to tell us if we're about to invest $4 billion in a toxic waste dump, Julian said coldly. Get her the access. Now. Seething, Finch led Clara to a primary analysis lab. The Nevada Basin core samples are in the climate-controlled vault. Your access will need to be authorized, of course. It may take some time. Compliance protocols. The way he said it made it clear he would be a wall of bureaucratic obstruction. I don't need the catalogued samples yet, Clara said, ignoring him and walking straight to a petrographic microscope. I need the refuse, the discarded drill shavings from the prep lab, the dust. Finch's smug expression faltered. The refuse? That's waste material. It's not controlled. Exactly, Clara replied, her hands already moving with a forgotten familiarity, preparing a slide. It's the only material in this entire building you haven't had a chance to clean yet. For the next several hours, Clara was a whirlwind of focused energy. She didn't just look at the samples, she interrogated them. The other geologists tried to work, but they found themselves watching the strange woman who moved through their state-of-the-art lab with an intimacy that unnerved them. She wasn't running the standard scans. She was using older, more painstaking methods. She crushed samples into fine powder for X-ray diffraction. She sliced impossibly thin sections of rock and examined them under polarized light, watching the way the minerals bent the spectrum. Julian watched from the lab's glass-walled observation office. He saw Finch and a senior technician in a heated, whispered conversation, both shooting venomous looks toward Clara. He was staking his empire on the instincts of a woman he'd met 3 hours ago, a woman who was currently staring at dust. Clara was deep in the microscopic world of the rock. It was just as she'd suspected. The primary composition was, on the surface, correct. But she was looking for a ghost, a trace element, an inclusion, something that shouldn't be there. The final, undeniable proof that would differentiate the valuable lithium from the toxic rhodosilicate was a microscopic crystal, visible only under extreme magnification and specific light conditions. It was nature's fingerprint. "It's not here," she whispered, frustration gnawing at her. The sun was beginning to stain the eastern sky. She was running on adrenaline and years of repressed fury, but her body was starting to fail. Finch approached her workstation, a smug smile playing on his lips. "Hitting a wall, Ms. Vance. Perhaps you're finding what we've all found. The data is sound. Some of us have been analyzing this formation for 6 months. We are confident in our conclusions." "You're confident because you're looking where he wants you to look," Clara muttered, rubbing her exhausted eyes. "This fingerprint, it was elusive. It should be here. Unless..." A cold, terrible idea began to form, a memory of a conversation with Marcus years ago about sample purification. "You're right, Dr. Finch," Clara said suddenly, her voice loud enough for the nearby technicians to hear. "I am at a dead end. I can't find the rhodosilicate inclusions." Finch's smile widened. "I'm sorry to hear that. I'll let Julian know you gave it your best shot." "But you know," Clara continued, casually leaning back in her chair, "I did find something else, something odd. In all the refuse samples, I found the trace amounts of hydrofluoric acid." Finch's smile froze. The technicians in the room exchanged confused glances. Clara kept talking, her eyes fixed on Finch's face. "It's a powerful solvent, highly corrosive. Not something you'd typically find in a geology lab. But it is exceptionally good at one thing: dissolving silicate minerals. If, for example, someone wanted to remove microscopic rhodosilicate crystals from a core sample without damaging the surrounding lithium ore, a carefully controlled acid wash would be the perfect way to do it. It would erase the evidence. It would make the poison look pure." Finch was as white as a sheet of paper. "That's an outrageous, baseless accusation." "Is it?" Clara stood up, her exhaustion replaced by a hunter's focus. "Because the only place hydrofluoric acid is stored in this facility is in the Advanced Materials Lab. And the access logs for that lab show only one person has signed out multiple carboys of it over the last 6 months, a person who had no authorized projects requiring it." She let the silence hang in the air for a beat. "You, Dr. Finch." "This is insane! I'm calling security!" Finch shrieked, turning to flee. "Go ahead," Clara said. "But while they're on their way, perhaps you can explain the series of wire transfers I asked Mr. Thorne's security chief to look into an hour ago. From an offshore consulting firm called Basin Advisory Group to your wife's personal savings account. Basin Advisory Group, which, after 3 layers of shell corporations, is owned by your old friend Marcus Thorne." Finch stopped dead. He looked at Clara, then at Julian, who was now standing in the doorway of the observation office, his face a mask of cold fury. He was trapped. His betrayal, his complicity was laid bare. Shaking, defeated, Finch slumped against a console. "He made me do it. He said it was just a formality, to ensure the data was clean for the investors." "Where are the original, unwashed core samples, Finch?" Julian's voice was like the cracking of a glacier. "They're gone," Finch whispered. "They were all processed, then destroyed. It's standard procedure." It was a perfect crime. The evidence had been chemically erased, and the source material was gone. It was Clara's word against a mountain of sanitized data. Just as a wave of despair washed over Clara, a new voice echoed from the lab's entrance. "Well, well, Clara Vance, I thought I smelled a ghost." Clara's blood ran cold. She spun around. Standing by the elevators, flanked by his own security detail, was Marcus Thorne. He was smiling, his arms spread wide in a gesture of false welcome. "Julian, what a surprise. I came to get a head start on the Monday morning celebration, but it looks like you've dug up my old, unstable assistant. How nostalgic." The atmosphere in the core crackled with the kind of tension that precedes a lightning strike. Marcus Thorne sauntered into the lab as if it were his personal kingdom, his expensive Italian loafers clicking on the pristine floor. He was the very picture of affable power, his charisma a weapon he wielded with casual precision. His gaze slid past the stunned technicians, past a trembling, broken Dr. Finch, and landed on Clara with the force of a physical blow. "I must admit, Clara, I'm impressed," Marcus said, his voice dripping with condescension. "From my star geologist to a pariah, to a waitress, and now a specialist consultant." He sneered. "You've had quite the journey. You look exhausted." Julian stepped forward, placing himself between Marcus and Clara. "Marcus, your celebration is cancelled. You're not welcome on this floor." "Oh, I think I am," Marcus said smoothly, taking a lab stool and spinning it around to sit. "You see, Julian, I heard you had some last-minute jitters, and I heard you'd hired some help from the local diner to try and poke holes in a deal that has been vetted by the best geological survey firms in the world. I'm here to put your mind at ease." He gestured magnanimously toward Finch. "Dr. Finch, tell my brother what you told me last night, that the deal is sound, that your own internal analysis confirms the Ethereum valuation beyond any shadow of a doubt." Finch, seeing a lifeline, nodded frantically. "He's right, Julian. This woman, she's a known fraud. She's feeding you a conspiracy theory to try and sabotage the most important acquisition in this company's history. My team and we've run every conceivable test. The data is solid." "You're a liar, Finch," Julian growled, his fists clenching. "Am I?" Marcus cut in, his voice like silk. "Or is she? She's a disgraced geologist with a documented history of falsifying data, Julian. Her word against your head of R&D, and the combined findings of GeoCore and Terra Analytics. Who do you think the board will believe? Who do you think the SEC will believe when I show them the security footage of you bringing a random waitress into a secure lab to tamper with evidence?" He had a point, a terrifying checkmate-level point. It was Clara's word, the word of a blacklisted scientist, against the entire established order of his own company. Clara had been silent, her hands shaking, not with fear, but with a white-hot rage. She looked at Marcus, the man who had mentored her, praised her, and then thrown her to the wolves without a second thought. "He's right," Clara said, her voice surprisingly quiet. Julian looked at her, his face a mask of disbelief and betrayal. "Clara, the data you have here," Clara said, her eyes welling with what looked like tears of defeat. "It's circumstantial. You covered your tracks perfectly, Marcus. The acid wash, the destroyed samples. It's my word against yours, and my word is worthless." Marcus's smile was blinding. He had won. He stood up, brushing imaginary dust from his trousers. "See, Julian? Your little ghost is all out of steam. Now, why don't you be a good older brother? Have security escort this woman out. and let's go prepare the press release that will make us the undisputed kings of the 21st century." Julian looked at Clara, his face etched with bitter disappointment. He had gambled on her, and it seemed she was folding. I only have one thing left," Clara said, her voice cracking with emotion. "It's not much." She reached down to the battered, decade-old leather satchel at her feet, the one bag she'd taken with her the day she fled her old life. "When you fired me, your security team cleared out my office. They took my computers, my files, but they missed something." She unzipped a worn side pocket and pulled out a series of long, thin, plastic tubes, each filled with a dusty column of rock and dirt. They were core samples. "It was my backup," she said, her voice suddenly losing its tremor and gaining a steely edge. "My personal archive, from the Mirage Creek site. The ones you ordered me to destroy." Marcus's smile faltered, his eyes fixed on the core tubes. "You see," Clara continued, the tears gone, her eyes now burning with righteous fire, "I was a very, very good geologist. I never threw away primary data, and I especially didn't throw it away when my boss told me to. This is the original unwashed, untouched rock from the site you built your first lie on." She looked up at him, a predator revealing her teeth. "You're right, Marcus. The evidence from the Nevada basin is gone. But you made one fatal, arrogant mistake. You're not just running a new scam. You're running the exact same scam again. The same geological formation, the same mineral composition, the same lie." She held up one of the tubes. "This isn't just rock from the first fraud, Marcus. It's the control group. It's the baseline. It's pure, toxic, worthless rhodosilicate with all its microscopic, crystalline fingerprints intact." She walked to the lab's most powerful electron microscope, the one connected to the main monitors. With practiced ease, she prepared 2 slides, one with dust from the Nevada basin refuse, the other with a scraping from her own archived core sample. She projected the images side by side on the giant screen for the entire room to see. On the left, the Nevada sample was clean, uniform. On the right, the Mirage Creek sample was littered with tiny, unmistakable, needle-like crystals, glowing faintly under the polarized light. "It's not my word against yours anymore, Marcus," Clara said, her voice ringing with the clarity of truth. "It's your own fraud, 5 years apart, exposed by the very evidence you ordered destroyed. It's a confession written in stone, and this time it has your name written all over it, not mine." Marcus Thorne stopped breathing. The color drained from his face as he stared at the screen, at the 2 images, one sanitized, one pure, that told the whole story. He was ruined. Julian Thorne, who had watched this stunning reversal with a dawning, terrible awe, finally spoke, his voice deadly calm. "Finch, you're fired. You will cooperate fully with the authorities, or I will personally ensure you spend the rest of your life in a courtroom." He turned to his brother. "Marcus." "Julian, wait." Marcus choked out, a cornered animal. "We can fix this. We can contain it." "Security!" Julian bellowed. The guards who had been waiting by the elevator surged forward. "Escort my brother from the building. He is to have no contact with any Thorne Industries employee. He will be met by our legal team and the district attorney in the lobby." As they dragged him away, shrieking protests and threats, Julian turned his cold eyes back to Marcus. "You came into my house," Julian whispered, with chilling intensity. "You tried to burn it down, and you used the one person alive who could prove you were the arsonist as a punchline to a bad joke." The 60th floor was silent again, save for the hum of the machines. Julian walked over to Clara, who was now leaning against the console, the adrenaline finally leaving her in a rush. He looked at the woman in the stained waitress uniform who had just saved his entire legacy. "You didn't just save my company, Clara Vance," he said, his voice rough with an emotion he rarely showed. "You reminded me of what ground truth really means." He extended a hand. "I'm creating a new division, Head of Geological Integrity and Strategic Surveying. It's yours. You will answer to no one but me. You will have a blank check to build your own team, and the full backing of our legal department to sue Marcus and every person who helped him. We will get your name back. We will get your career back. We will get everything back." Clara looked at his outstretched hand. Then she looked around the lab, at the microscopes, the data screens, the very tools of the world that had betrayed her. She had won, but she suddenly realized she was terrified. Could she really step back into this world? Was the ghost of Cassie truly gone? The fall of Marcus Thorne was a quiet earthquake that shook the foundations of the corporate world. It wasn't a tabloid spectacle. It was a brutal, efficient corporate execution. Armed with Clara's pristine core samples and Finch's terrified confession, Julian's legal team didn't just oust Marcus. They systematically dismantled his network, exposed his corruption, and handed him over to federal prosecutors on a silver platter. The original fraud to the legal and corporate machinery moved with the brutal, impersonal force of a glacier. Marcus Thorne was not merely fired. He was excised, his name carved from the company's history like a fossil from bedrock. The subsequent investigation, fueled by Finch's terrified, exhaustive confession and Clara's pristine, 5-year-old core samples, uncovered a rot that ran deeper than anyone had imagined. It was a network of kickbacks, falsified reports, and corporate espionage. The official apology issued by Thorne Industries was not a mere press release. It was a multi-million-dollar act of public contrition, a legal document that formally expunged the fabricated case against Clara Vance and restored her name with the weight of a court order. Clara Vance was no longer a ghost. She was the director of the newly formed Division of Geological Integrity, a title she had insisted upon over Julian's more corporate-friendly suggestions. Her office was on the 60th floor, adjacent to the labs she now commanded, a world of sterile white and humming chrome. She had refused the penthouse-level suite Julian had offered, the one with panoramic views and imported wood. Proximity to the data, to the rock, was the only luxury she craved. But victory was not a destination. It was a landscape she now had to navigate, and it was filled with aftershocks. The ghost of Cassie was not banished by a job title or a bank balance. It lingered in the quiet moments. It was the phantom weight of a silver tray in her hand when she stood for too long. It was the instinctive, self-effacing dip of her head when a senior executive entered the elevator. It was the cold knot of anxiety that tightened in her stomach during a catered lunch meeting at Aurelia, a meeting Julian had arranged as a symbolic gesture of triumph, not realizing it felt more like returning to the scene of a crime. She had sat there, in a tailored suit that felt like a costume, picking at a scallop and feeling the gazes of her former colleagues, the whispers of, "That's her," like the hiss of static. She could analyze the tectonic stresses of a continent, but could not withstand the pressure of a hushed dining room. Her work became her fortress. She poured herself into building her division with a feverish, almost monastic devotion. She vetted every new hire personally, looking not for the most impressive resumes, but for a certain kind of hunger in their eyes, a reverence for the scientific method, a disdain for shortcuts. She developed what the junior geologists began to call the Vance Protocol, a system of radical transparency and redundant verification. Every survey required 3 independent teams using different methodologies, All raw data, including failures and anomalies, was uploaded to a shared, immutable ledger. It was inefficient, expensive, and infuriating to the company's accountants. But it was incorruptible. She was building a firewall against the kind of lie that had almost consumed her. Julian, to his credit, honored his promise of autonomy. He acted as her shield against the board and the CFO, who saw her division as a costly overcorrection. Their relationship settled into a strange, formal orbit. They were allies, not friends. Their conversations were precise, focused on data points and risk assessments. He saw her as a powerful, almost mystical asset, a human lie detector for the Earth itself. He respected her mind, but seemed wary of the wounded woman inside. And Clara, for her part, saw him as a necessary force, the gravity that held her new world together. She was grateful, but gratitude is not trust. She analyzed his motives as she would a mineral sample, searching for inclusions and fractures. She could never forget that the same blood that ran through his veins had also run through Marcus's. The true test of their alliance came 7 months after her return. It wasn't a dramatic discovery, but a quiet, insidious problem. Thorn Industries was in the final stages of acquiring a smaller mining operation in Chile, one that controlled a significant copper deposit. It was a straightforward, profitable deal, a way for Julian to signal to the market that the company was stable and moving past the Marcus scandal. Clara's team, as a matter of course, was running a final integrity audit on the Chilean company's geological surveys. "The data is solid," her lead analyst, a sharp young woman named Anya, reported. "The copper yields are exactly as advertised. But there's something else." She projected a subterranean water table map onto the main screen in Clara's office. The mine's primary aquifer is hydrologically linked to a series of smaller, deeper wells that provide fresh water to 3 indigenous villages in the foothills. The existing survey mentions this, but classifies the risk of contamination as negligible. "And you disagree?" Clara asked, her eyes already scanning the pressure and flow rate data. "I think negligible is a lie of omission," Anya said, pointing to a specific stratum of porous volcanic rock. "Their models assume a consistent, low permeability bedrock. But our deep radar scans show this fault line. It's a direct conduit. It's not a matter of if. The tailings contaminate the water supply. It's a matter of when. 5 years, maybe 10. But it will happen. To mitigate it properly, we'd need to install a closed-loop water recycling system. It would add $100 million to the acquisition cost and shave at least 8% off the projected annual profit. Clara felt a cold dread. This was the kind of truth that corporations hated, a quiet, expensive, long-term truth. She took the report to Julian. He read it in silence, his face an unreadable mask of granite. He steepled his fingers, his gaze fixed on the skyline behind her. $100 million, he said softly. 8%. "It's the ground truth, Julian," Clara said, her voice steady. "The current owners have been operating there for 20 years. There have been no incidents. Their report isn't fraudulent, just optimistic. We could proceed with the acquisition and commission a further study on the water table. Kick the can down the road. By the time it becomes a real problem, we'll have already made our money back 5 times over." He wasn't looking at her. He was talking to the numbers, to the logic of the deal. "You'd be poisoning people," Clara said, the words tasting like ash. "Slowly, quietly, but you'd be doing it." "It's business, Clara," he said, his voice hardening slightly. "Every project has an acceptable level of risk." In that moment, he looked so much like his brother that it took her breath away. The same pragmatism, the same casual weighing of profit against humanity. The ghost of Cassie screamed inside her head. This is how it starts. The small compromise. The optimistic report. Run. She stood up, her chair scraping against the marble floor. Then my division will not sign off on the audit, she said, her voice trembling but clear. And if you proceed with the acquisition without our sign-off, I will resign. And my resignation letter, which will detail exactly why I am leaving, will be sent to the EPA, the Chilean Environmental Ministry, and the New York Times. Julian finally turned to look at her. His eyes, which were usually a cool, detached grey, were blazing. He saw not a subordinate, but an equal. He saw the bedrock of her principles, and he saw that they were unbreakable. The silence stretched, thick with the weight of billions of dollars and the fate of 3 unseen villages. He let out a long, slow breath, the tension leaving his shoulders. He leaned back in his chair and gave a short, humorless laugh. You don't leave much room for negotiation, do you, Director Vance? He picked up his phone. Get me the CFO, he barked into it. The Chile deal just got $100 million more expensive. And find out what it takes to build the best goddamn water purification system on the planet. He hung up and looked at her, a new, deeper respect dawning in his eyes. You were right, he said. That's what I hired you for. Not just to find the truth, but to defend it. That day, something shifted between them. The fragile alliance, forged in crisis, began to harden into genuine trust. He had been tested, and he had not broken. The summons arrived on a Tuesday, a thick manila envelope delivered by a stoic courier. The people of the state of New York versus Marcus Thorne. She was being called as the prosecution's star witness. The trial was the final, public exorcism. Clara walked into the courtroom feeling like 2 people. On the outside, she was Director Vance, her hair pulled back in a severe bun, her suit a dark, conservative armor. But inside, Cassie was cowering, remembering the shame, the disbelief, the utter powerlessness of her first downfall. Marcus was there, thinner, his face etched with a bitterness that had corroded his boyish charm. He refused to look at her. His defense attorney, a sleek, silver-haired man with the eyes of a predator, began his cross-examination with a condescending smile. He didn't attack the science directly. That was a losing battle. He attacked her. Ms. Vance, he began, his voice dripping with false sympathy. Is it true that after your departure from Thorne Industries, you spent nearly 5 years working as a waitress under an assumed name? Yes, Clara said, her voice clear and steady, amplified by the microphone. A waitress, in a restaurant called Aurelia, a job that requires, shall we say, a certain degree of deference, anonymity. It requires professionalism and efficiency, Clara corrected him. Of course, but you would agree it's a significant fall from grace for a Caltech-educated geologist, wouldn't you? It must have been humiliating. It was work, Clara said simply. The lawyer circled, sensing a weakness. And during this time, you harbored a deep-seated resentment for my client, Marcus Thorne, the man you blame for your misfortune. I blame him for stealing my work and destroying my career, she stated. So when you happened to overhear his conversation that night, you saw an opportunity, didn't you? A chance for revenge. A chance to reclaim your former glory by destroying the man who fired you. This wasn't about science, Ms. Vance. This was a personal vendetta. He had laid the trap. The jury was watching, their faces a mixture of pity and suspicion. He had painted her as an unstable, vengeful woman. The ghost of Cassie wanted to shrink, to apologize, to become invisible. But Clara took a deep breath and looked not at the lawyer, but at the jury. For 5 years, she began, her voice quiet but resonant. filling the silent courtroom. I was Cassie, and Cassie's job was to be invisible. Her job was to see everything and be seen by no one. I learned to read the subtle signals people give off when they think no one of consequence is watching. I saw the tremor in a man's hand when he was lying to his wife. I saw the flicker of fear in a young executive's eyes before a big meeting. I learned to observe human nature with the same dispassionate focus I once reserved for rock strata. She leaned forward slightly. When I looked at Marcus Thorne that night, I didn't just hear a man discussing a business deal. I saw the same arrogance, the same reckless disregard for consequence that I had seen 5 years earlier, and when I saw the spectral analysis chart, it was like a geologist seeing a familiar fault line in a new mountain range. It's a signature, a pattern of behavior that precedes a catastrophic event. She turned her gaze to the defense attorney, her eyes like polished steel. You call it a vendetta. I call it pattern recognition. The core samples I provided prove the geological fraud. But my time as Cassie, it taught me how to spot the man who would commit it. He wasn't just lying about the rock. His entire character is a toxic deposit, and he was about to poison his own family's company. My testimony is not an act of revenge. It is a field report on a disaster I was uniquely qualified to identify. The courtroom was utterly still. She had taken his weapon, the shame of her past, and forged it into a shield of credibility. She hadn't just explained the science, she had explained the truth of her own life. In that moment, the ghost of Cassie did not vanish. It integrated, becoming a part of her, a source of quiet strength, a reminder of the clarity that comes from being invisible. Marcus Thorne was convicted on all counts. A year later, Clara stood on a wind-swept plateau in the Nevada basin. The land that had been the site of Marcus's great lie was now the home of the Vance Institute for Geological Integrity. It wasn't a mine. At Clara's insistence, Julian had agreed to turn the worthless mountain into something far more valuable. It was now a world-class research facility and training ground, funded by Thorne Industries as a non-profit foundation. Here, the next generation of geologists learned the Vance Protocol, using the rhodosilicate deposit as their primary case study, a permanent, mountain-sized monument to the cost of a single lie. A helicopter descended, and Julian stepped out, dressed in jeans and a worn field jacket. He walked over to where she stood, watching a group of students conduct a gravimetric survey. "They look sharp," he said, nodding toward the students. "They are," Clara replied, a smile touching her lips. "They ask too many questions. It's wonderful." They stood in comfortable silence, a silence born not of caution, but of complete understanding. "The board sent this over," Julian said, handing her a tablet. On the screen was a proposal to name the new corporate headquarters, a gleaming skyscraper under construction in downtown Manhattan, the Clara Vance Tower. Clara laughed, a genuine unburdened sound that echoed in the clean desert air. "Absolutely not," she said, handing it back. "My name belongs on lab reports and scholarship funds, not on buildings." "I thought you might say that," he said, smiling. He looked out at the vast, silent landscape, a place of personal and professional ruin that she had transformed into a symbol of redemption. "You know, for the longest time, I thought the most valuable thing in the ground was whatever we could pull out of it and sell. Lithium, diamonds, copper, gold." He turned to her, his gaze clear and direct. "You taught me the most valuable thing in the ground is the truth." Clara looked at her hands. They were calloused again, stained with the red dust of the earth. They were the hands of a scientist, a builder, a teacher. She was no longer defined by the genius she had been or the ghost she had become. She was defined by the work she was doing now, by the foundation she was laying for others. She had finally reached her own bedrock. "The truth was always there, Julian," she said, her eyes reflecting the endless blue of the desert sky. "You just have to be willing to dig for it. And you have to be willing to listen, even when it's not what you want to hear." He nodded, understanding completely. "The consulting fee is going to be astronomical, isn't it?" "For the rest of your life, Mr. Thorne," she replied, her smile bright and unwavering. "For the rest of your life."